Welcome back, it's me Lou. I'm here for a special video where we will feature my custom Dark Knight Resurrection Bane action figure. Okay, so recently, if you've been watching my videos, I've been on this kick and I've been making a lot of custom action figures using the McFarlane DC Multiverse action figures as the base body. Previously, I made a Jason Todd Hush, a Wildcats Grifter, and also a Wildcats Spartan. So as a result of making all of those McFarlane custom action figures, it left me with a lot of extra pieces, and I don't like my pieces to go to waste. So I kind of like just stared at them for like an hour until I could figure out what I wanted to do with them, and this came to mind. So this is my custom McFarlane DC Multiverse Dark Knight Resurrection Bane. Alright, so before we talk about this figure any further, let's talk about the inspiration behind this. So for those of you who remember, many years ago, there was the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy of movies. They were incredibly awesome, and one of the really standout characters was the Tom Hardy Bane character, which we see right here. I remember initially when fans saw the costume, they were kind of skeptical, but you know, Tom Hardy's performance in the movie was just amazing. It was a very stellar performance, brought a lot of power and authority to the Bane character. You know, unlike the Bane that appeared in, which movie was it? Batman and Robin. You know, that one's kind of just like a mindless thug. Tom Hardy's Bane was very calculating, powerful, and he was just such an intimidating villain. I love this costume a lot. The mask has become very iconic. The original comic book version of Bane looked like a giant, oversized professional wrestler. He was wearing like a black, kind of like a singlet. He had like a luchador mask, and he had all these pipes and hoses attached to his body, kind of like stemming from the base of his neck. And Bane is kind of like powered up by this enhancement drug called Venom. So one thing that was different with the Tom Hardy design is that they kind of did away with all the neon green tubing and stuff, and they kind of gave him a much more tactical look as opposed to the original look where he looked more like a pro wrestler. They've done away with the luchador mask, and instead they kind of gave him this like breathing apparatus. And much like some other characters, you know, this guy kind of looks like he just like robbed an army surplus store. So looking at this, one thing that I found really curious about this design of the character. So if you watch one of my recent reviews, I did a review on the McFarlane DC Multiverse Dark Detective figure. And there's certain elements of that figure that looks like they pulled from the Christopher Nolan Bane. So, you know, like for example, the Dark Detective has a long coat, has very similar pants, and there's just something about the aesthetic and feel that really calls back to this. So since some of the extra pieces I had from my other customs was from the Dark Detective figure, I'm like, you know what, I should utilize those pieces and try to make a Bane action figure, which we see right here. Alright, so let's talk about the pieces I used. So first off, the head is actually a Marvel Legends head. It belongs to one of the henchman characters. I think it's either I want to say maybe the Hydra Trooper. I think it was like a 2-pack. It came with like a skinny Hydra Trooper and the big like tankish, bulky, muscular guy. And I think this is where the extra head came from. So the head is a Marvel Legends head. To attach it to the McFarlane body, I had to use like a screw because the ball joint wasn't large enough. For the mask was kind of tricky. I didn't want to sculpt it because I didn't feel like my sculpting skills are that strong. So I just kind of dug through my parts bin. And one thing I found was a G.I. Joe Classified Series elbow pad, which I think belonged to Gung Ho. So I took an X-Acto knife, cut it up so that it was, I kind of cut it down the middle of the straps, and it kind of looked like Bane's mask, and then I wanted to detail the mask. So if you have the Marvel Legends Captain Marvel Minerva figure, she comes with like a satchel, and there's kind of like 5 bullets on it, 5 or 6 bullets. So I cut the bullets off of the satchel, trimmed them down, and then I glued them to the mask to create, the look of the breathing apparatus. The Minerva satchel also had a very long shoulder strap, and I cut that apart, and I used that as the strap for the top of the mask. And again, I detailed this piece with the bullet from the Minerva satchel. I took one of the bullets, cut them in half, and detailed the back of the mask right there. And what holds the mask onto the face is Gorilla Gel Super Glue. It's really strong stuff. It almost bonds immediately to contact, so you have to use it sparingly so it's not too messy. So that's the Bane head. I could have repainted it, but I didn't mind the stubble on the top of his head. So in my head, this character is from a movie they never made. Like, for example, if they ever revisit the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight movies, in my head, I'd probably call it like Dark Knight Resurrection, and then you bring back the Bane character. So this is kind of how I imagine Bane, if they brought him back. So that's how I made the head. The jacket is actually it's actually the DC Multiverse Grifter Jacket, and that jacket's green. It's made of a soft plastic, and if you paint it, it's a nightmare. I spoke about this before in previous videos when I make customs. Soft rubbery plastics and paint, they don't work well together. So initially I had to prime this with like 5 coats of Mod Podge just to protect the paint from the it creates a layer of sealant above the plastic, so it's the sealant's between the plastic and the paint, so the paint doesn't necessarily come into contact with the plastic. Unfortunately, the paint kind of permeated through the sealant a little, and I think also the Mod Podge reacted with the plastic, so then this started to like become all tacky, and it took on the appearance like it was melting or sweating. So I had to apply probably 12 coats of spray-on Mod Podge just to like eliminate the tackiness. So now you can actually feel it. It's like smooth to touch. The only unfortunate thing is that Mod Podge, it's essentially a PVA glue, much like Elmer's glue. And when it dries, it starts to constrict and really shrink. So then it kind of pulled the paints apart and almost takes on this like cracking appearance, which I don't mind because I kind of look at it like an extra detail. Makes the jacket look old and worn. So the jacket is a repainted DC Multiverse Grifter Jacket. The body is the Dark Detective body. So the upper body here, that's the Dark Detective. I took some rubbing alcohol and just scrubbed off the bat logo. The belt, the utility belt, still the Dark Detective. I just cut off the gun holster and then the lasso, cut those off. No modifications to the leg. This is strictly the McFarlane Dark Detective legs. The arms, again, these are from the Grifter figure. The hands are from the Dark Detective. So with Bane in the comic books, he always has like some kind of like technology on his body. Sometimes he has these like forearm bracers, and sometimes the bracers actually pump that drug Venom into his system. So if you've seen some of the other versions of if you've seen some of the other versions of Bane in the comic book or in like the Arkham video games, he has like bracers on his arms, and there's sometimes small canisters either on the forearms or on the back. And then there's these tubes, and it pumps that green drug fluid into his system. So that's what all these hoses are for. In the comic book, the hose actually plugs in at the base of his neck, but because of the high collar, I just instead opted to plug it into the back of his head, So these green hoses, these are actually very thin gauge electrical wiring. I just kind of drilled them out and then just popped them into place. One thing I wanted to give Bane is I kind of wanted to give him, a little bit of more oomph, because the Christopher Nolan design, it's very cool, but I kind of wanted to make this feel like it was almost kind of like, borderline video game or comic book. So one accessory I really like is from the Marvel Legends MCU figures, and there's a Crossbones figure from the MCU, and he comes with those like power gloves. So I'm like, you know what? If Bane is really strong, you know, he's like souped up on like Venom steroids. I'm like, let's give him some power gloves. You know, he could punch through brick walls. You know, he could flip over the Batmobile. I'm like, so I did that. I gave him the power gloves from the Crossbones MCU figure, and I kind of had to slit them down the middle because I could just slide them onto the forearm, but I didn't want to risk rubbing off the paint. So I just cut a slit down the middle, and then it easily bends on and off. So that's essentially it. You know, it's a cool figure. You know, I'm really hoping that in some time in the future, McFarlane, you know, creates action figures from the Dark Knight movies. Way back when Mattel had the license, you know, they did that also. You know, they made the Dark Knight figures, and I believe those fell under their Movie Masters line. And those figures, I still feel they hold up pretty well today, the old Mattel Dark Knight figures. They're smaller in scale, but they have a lot of points of articulation, and the detail is amazing. They're a lot better than some of Mattel's like later efforts for like Justice League or Shazam or like Superman vs. Batman. Yeah, so let's do one last pass at this character. Here's a front look of my Bane figure. Let's get up close of his head. There's his head, looking impressive. Profile view. You see the power gauntlets, the Venom tubing, the Venom plugging into the back of his head. I kind of like that cracking effect on the jacket. You know, if you ever owned any like really old leather jackets, they kind of weather down over time. So that makes it look a little bit cool. But yeah, if you're a customizer or if you're looking into like creating customs, do some research, because painting on soft rubbery plastics, it's always been a nightmare for me. I can never figure out how people do it. And there's his legs, stock legs. Yeah, so great figure. I'd like to take another stab at this. I'm very fond of the Christopher Nolan Bane figure, and you know, this is not accurate to the one in the movie. Like I said, this is something that just kind of popped out of my head. It's kind of like more so fan fiction based than anything. But that's the fun thing about creating customs, you know. You don't have to please anyone but yourself. You know, unless you're being paid to do a custom, you know, if it's a commission, you know, the only person you really just have to appease is yourself. You know, if you're happy with the custom, that's all that really matters. You know, some people might harp on the accuracy of your custom or the quality of it or the craftsmanship. But if it's something that makes you happy, you know, that's what really counts. You know, but if you're being paid for it, you know, you really want to do what the client says and, you know, just deliver the goods. But otherwise, you know, create customs. You know, it's a fun hobby. I enjoy it a lot. And I say this all the time. If there's not a figure of a character you want, just go ahead and, you know, take a stab and take on the challenge of making a custom. It's a very rewarding, fun experience. All right, so with that being said, let's wrap this video up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you are new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning subscriber or viewer, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. All right, thanks for everything. Later.